Conditions, stage 42. Conditions are the if-then sentences. If this happens, what will follow? In English, we use them. There are 4 basic types, and I'm not going to get into exactly what they are, except that basically it is how likely or how unlikely. The 4 types are broken down into how likely or how unlikely the action is, or the hypothesis is of the if. And so the more unlikely it is to occur than it would be, or the more likely it is to occur than would be 0 condition. But we won't get into it. So just look at these. In the if clause is sometimes referred to as the protasis, and then the resulting clause is referred to as the apodosis. So the protasis is if, the apodosis is the then. You don't always have to use then in English. In Latin, there is no corresponding then, but we do have something for if. So if you don't brush your teeth, you get cavities. So right there's little hypothetical action. It's pretty straightforward. It's factual. That would be called a 0 condition clause. If you rest, you will feel better. And I do want to point out in that protasis, if you rest, although the idea is that the resting has not happened yet, we still in English use a present verb. We don't use a future verb. If you rest, you will feel better. And that's important when we look at how do we translate the corresponding, how are we going to translate the Latin conditions, which are slightly different, into good English or idiomatic English. And then you move on to something so if you rest, you will feel better. That's still a pretty likely outcome, but you're not you might not rest. Now we move into something that's completely or close to being completely hypothetical. If I won the lottery, I would travel to the moon. And notice that in English we use that past tense verb, if I won the lottery, even though it's an action that hasn't happened at all. It's completely hypothetical. Sometimes we would have translated that as, should I win the lottery, I would travel to the moon. I think that's fallen out of fashion to use the should now, although it would be correct. Should I win the lottery, I would travel to the moon. And then we have this one. If you had told me you needed a ride, I would have left early. Okay, so those are some examples in English. In Latin, it's pretty straightforward for right now. There are 6 conditions in Latin, and it's all based on the verbs used. Today we're only going to learn 3 of them. Well, you can take those 6 conditions and split them into 2 types. There's the indicative, and then there's the subjunctive. 3 indicative conditions, 3 subjunctive conditions. So today we're only going to learn the indicative conditions, and they're the more straightforward ones. Actions that are possibly to happen, likely to happen. And so here are the three examples. Si id facit, prudens est. Si id fecit, prudens fuit. Si id faciet, prudens erit. And all I did is change the tense of the verbs to give an example of the three types of conditions. If he does this, he is wise. If he did this, he was wise. And you probably could get away with translating that middle one. If he did this, he is wise. You could probably get away with translating that second condition. I mean, the apodosis of that second condition as present tense. And then finally, if he does this, he will be wise. Now, again, that last one, a lot of times you could just translate it just like the first one. But also notice faciet is future. And I did not translate it as future at all because we do not use the future in the protasis in English. We would not say if you will do this. We just say if you do this. Okay, so pay attention to that. All right, the first condition is called the simple fact present because you are using a present tense verb, est is present tense, on both sides, in both parts of the sentence. Lego is present. If my son is dead, I leave the farm to the freedman. Easy, easy. Easy to translate, easy to identify. Those are present tense verbs. I translate them like the present tense. Nothing to it. Simple fact present. Simple fact past. Much like the present, in both parts, you're going to see a past tense verb, either perfect or imperfect. Dixisti, eroisti, they're both perfect tense verbs. Dixisti could have been imperfect. So, if you said this, you were wrong. Not a lot of hypothetical. Again, very straightforward. Translate it pretty easily. Just make both verbs past tense. And now we get to the simple fact future. So I think you get what's going on. Simple fact present, using present tense. Simple fact past, using past tense. Simple fact future, you're using future tense or future perfect in the protasis. But when you translate, you never, like I've said before, you never use future or future perfect in the protasis. You're going to substitute that for a present tense verb. And by the way, sometimes this is called the future more vivid condition because it corresponds to the subjunctive future less vivid. But future or future perfect tenses. So in fact, this right here is future perfect. But as you can see, I did not translate it as future perfect. Because literally it would be if he will have looked back. Because the idea is he didn't do it, but he might do it, or he will do it. He will see something amazing. We're not going to say that in English. We can just say, use a simple present. If he looks back, he will see something amazing. So it's as simple as that. 3 conditions. Simple fact present, simple fact past, simple fact future. You can identify them very easily based on what is the tense of the verb in the conditions. And then you can see how to translate it. One thing I didn't mention, you can also use nisi instead of si. Nisi would be the negative. So like if I said nisi respexere, unless you look back, you will not see something. Or unless you look back, yeah, I would probably add in a negative, like nisi respexeret aliquid miri non videbit. Unless you look back, you will not see something amazing. So nisi can mean unless or except, and it shows the opposite or the negative of that. All right, to practice, why don't you do page 130, and let's look at, there are several exercises. We have number 2, number 4, and number 5. Now, sorry for that pause. Number 6 highlights a few instances of the other type of subjunctives that we are not really learning right now. It just gives you some examples of you're seeing them in the stories, but we're not really learning them. Okay, we'll go over these sentences on Thursday. Okay, all right.